Dr. Sarah Chen had broken the first rule of xenobiology fieldwork. She had fallen asleep in the middle of an alien forest without setting up a perimeter alarm. The twin suns of Carvath Prime cast dappled shadows through the purple canopy above her, and the gentle hum of insect-like creatures had lulled her into an exhausted slumber after 3 days of continuous research. She had been tracking the movement patterns of the local fauna, trying to understand how Earth's newest colony world functioned. The Carvathi ecosystem was unlike anything humanity had encountered before. The apex predators here were the thornbacks, massive creatures that stood nearly 3 meters tall at the shoulder, with razor-sharp spines running along their backs and jaws powerful enough to crush steel. Sarah had seen them from a distance, watched them hunt in packs, studied their social structures through her drones. What she hadn't expected was to wake up surrounded by 6 pairs of golden eyes staring at her with curious intensity. Her heart hammered against her ribs as consciousness returned. Training screamed at her to stay still, to not make sudden movements. The cubs were massive, each one already the size of a full-grown earth tiger, their bodies covered in soft gray fur that would eventually harden into armored plates. They couldn't have been more than a few months old, but their developing claws and teeth were still perfectly capable of tearing her apart. The largest cub, a female with distinctive white markings around her eyes, sat directly in front of Sarah's face. The creature tilted her head, studying the human with an expression that seemed almost puzzled. Sarah could see the intelligence behind those eyes, the same keen awareness that made thornbacks such efficient hunters. She held her breath as the cub leaned closer, sniffing at her face. The creature's breath was warm and smelled faintly of the berries that grew throughout the forest. Sarah knew that young thornbacks were omnivorous, only developing their full predatory instincts as they matured. Still, those teeth were uncomfortably close to her throat. The cub made a sound, a soft, chirping noise that seemed to come from deep in its chest. The other cubs responded with similar calls, creating a strange chorus around Sarah's prone form. Then, to her absolute astonishment, the white-marked cub lay down. It positioned itself lengthwise along Sarah's left side, its warm body pressing against her. One by one, the other cubs followed suit. They arranged themselves in a circle around her, their bodies forming a living barrier between Sarah and the rest of the forest. The smallest cub, barely half the size of its siblings, nestled against her right shoulder and let out a contented rumble. Sarah's mind raced through every piece of xenobiology training she had received. This behavior made no sense. Thornback cubs should have been wary of unknown species, particularly one that smelled as alien as a human. Their instinct should have been to either flee or attack, not to cuddle up like oversized puppies. She slowly moved her hand, testing the cub's reactions. The white-marked female opened one eye but didn't seem alarmed. Emboldened, Sarah gently touched the cub's fur. It was softer than she expected, with an underlayer of down beneath the coarser outer coat. The cub leaned into the touch, that rumbling sound growing louder. The reason for their behavior clicked in Sarah's mind as she felt the cubs shivering slightly despite their thick fur. The temperature was dropping as the suns moved lower in the sky. Carvath Prime had dramatic temperature swings between day and night, sometimes varying by 40 degrees Celsius. The cubs were using her body heat, and she was benefiting from theirs in return. But there was more to it than simple thermodynamics. Sarah had read reports about pack-bonding behavior in Earth predators, how young animals sometimes imprinted on unexpected creatures. Could these cubs somehow see her as part of their pack? Or was something else at play? A twig snapped in the distance, and instantly the cubs were alert. Their heads lifted as one, ears swiveling toward the sound. The white-marked female rose to a crouch, positioning herself directly in front of Sarah. The other cubs adjusted their positions, maintaining the protective circle but now facing outward, toward potential threats. Sarah heard it then, the heavy footfalls of an adult thornback moving through the undergrowth. Her blood ran cold. If the mother found a human surrounded by her cubs, there would be no opportunity to explain or retreat. Adult thornbacks could accelerate to 70 kilometers per hour in seconds, and their hunting success rate was over 90%. The cubs, however, didn't seem frightened. They remained in their protective formation, but their body language wasn't defensive. If anything, they seemed excited, their tails swishing in anticipation. The adult thornback emerged from the tree line, and Sarah's breath caught. This was the matriarch she had been studying, designated Alpha 7 in her research notes. The massive predator stood at the edge of the small clearing, her intelligent eyes taking in the scene before her. For a long moment, nothing happened. Sarah could feel her pulse pounding in her ears. The cubs maintained their positions, and Sarah noticed now that they weren't just protecting her from the adult. They were presenting her to the matriarch, the way cubs might present a prize or offering. Alpha 7 moved closer, her steps deliberate and careful. She lowered her enormous head, sniffing at Sarah from a distance. The human forced herself to remain calm, to project no fear or aggression. She had studied animal behavior long enough to know that predators could sense panic. The matriarch made a low sound, something between a growl and a hum. The cubs responded immediately, their postures relaxing. The white-marked female looked back at Sarah, then at her mother, as if seeking approval. What happened next would be something Sarah would spend years trying to explain to skeptical colleagues. Alpha 7 lowered herself to the ground and lay down at the edge of the cub circle, completing the protective formation. The matriarch positioned herself as the final wall between Sarah and the darkening forest beyond. Sarah understood then what she was witnessing. Somehow, through some mechanism she couldn't fully comprehend, the Thornback family had accepted her presence. More than that, they had included her in their pack dynamic, offering her the same protection they would give to their own young. As night fell completely and the temperature continued to drop, Sarah found herself surrounded by warmth and the rhythmic breathing of sleeping predators. The cubs had shifted closer, piling against her in a furry heap. Even the matriarch had moved nearer, her massive bulk serving as a windbreak against the cold night air. Sarah's research equipment was still running, recording everything. Tomorrow, the scientific community would have documentation of something unprecedented. A human being not just tolerated but actively protected by one of the galaxy's most dangerous predator species. But in that moment, lying in the darkness with alien cubs snuggled against her and their mother standing watch, Sarah simply marveled at the universe's capacity for surprise. Humanity had spent so long assuming they understood the rules of nature, the boundaries between predator and prey, the limits of cross-species interaction. Yet here she was, safe in the heart of what should have been deadly danger. The smallest cub yawned, revealing rows of developing teeth, then burrowed deeper against Sarah's side. She carefully wrapped an arm around the young creature, feeling its heartbeat steady and strong. Humans had come to the stars expecting to conquer, to dominate, to impose their will on the cosmos. What they kept discovering instead was that sometimes the greatest strength came not from standing apart, but from the unexpected connections formed in the quiet moments between species. Sarah closed her eyes, surrendering to exhaustion once more, this time with a wall of predators standing guard. She was safe. She was warm, and she was, impossibly, home.